All right. Today is October 11th, Tuesday, October 11th, and it is time for another M365 Government Community Call featuring your favorites, Sarah Gilbert, Rima Reyes, Jeremy Wood, and special guest off camera at the moment, but soon to join us, Stacy Deere. How's everybody doing?
Yay, great. 3-day weekend, or we just had a 3-day weekend. It was great.
That's nice.
I'm just
Government
happy it's
schedules
colder.
are so nice.
Oh, yeah, well, that's right. I'm government. Now everybody gets Columbus Day.
Oh, man. Well, listen, that was the most game show-like I've ever introduced the show, but I'm very excited to have everyone back. I feel like for the last 2 or 3 months, someone has been missing. So it's good to see y'all.
I didn't expect, like the Mickey Mouse, roll call.
Oh, no. What a reference. Yeah.
And now we need to change the show music for the week. So,
yeah. Sorry. I was just thinking Price is Right in my head, by the way.
Yes.
Side
No,
note.
please do. Hold on. Everyone quiet. We're just going to hear it for a moment. Just radio silence to really mess with the producers. And so typical show coming up, we're going to have our community events. We're going to talk about the roadmap, or maybe we won't. A couple of pieces of news from the tech community, and then our big interview on the Power Platform in government. But before we get to any of that, let's kick it off with community events. There are a lot of events going on, and we have reached out a little bit more than normal to pull in some stuff from the national scene because there's some really interesting things happening. So to start from the national scene, Microsoft Ignite. It is hybrid this year with the base of operations in Seattle, but only something like 3,000 of the usual 25 will be in person. I bring this up with the foreknowledge that typically Ignite is not very relevant to the government side. In fact, the last time I went to Ignite in person, two whole sessions were government focused.
Yeah, one of those was Rima. Well, I will say this, though, because I've gone to Ignite for many, many, many years. Because government lags, we do get a really great preview and get to hear lessons learned from everybody else who went through the challenges first.
There we go. And that is the truth of it. It is generally focused on what is the commercially viable things that are coming and what are people learning. And I appreciate that, Jeremy. It's true. You do get an opportunity to see the eventual roadmap for government and what are people learning from what's rolled out. Speaking of learning, there are 2 sessions being presented by members of this team. I've got a session on Zero Trust, which I think is hugely relevant to the government, even though it isn't on specifically. Well, in fact, it's not specific to technology. It's more specific to concepts of how to include Zero Trust in your collaboration side, not just with multi-factor authentication and such. And then Rima, want to tell us a little about your session?
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm doing a session with my best friend, Roxy and Dibumadu. She's actually a former guest on this podcast, and she's been on a lot of other podcasts too, but we love talking about self-advocacy, and so that's actually what we're talking about. So it's how to get what you deserve at work through self-advocacy. If you want to check out more about the session, you can go to aka.ms/self-advocacy ignite. It's going to be on October 13th at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a jam-packed session with tangible tips on really kind of how to grow your self-advocacy worth and know your worth. And it's going to be a bunch of good stuff. So please join us.
Oh, no. We're competing for people. We're at the same time.
Oh, no. Well, but the good news is for Ignite, all the sessions, you can usually watch them again later.
Yeah,
that is true.
Recorded. And what we can even do after both of your sessions are recorded is we can do a really weird mashup or something of both of them.
Nice. We can actually we can have them. We're going to do this, Sarah.
Okay.
It's going to be called Zero Trust Self-Advocacy.
No.
Yes.
No.
That's
Figure it
fantastic.
out.
How to trust no one and advocate for yourself. That's now. We talked about the fact that there is typically not very much government. I think the first thing to point out is the 2 sessions that we're talking about are not tech focused, which means they are for government. They are for literally anybody. And so you should go, even if you typically don't check the schedule because you're used to there not being stuff technologically related to your job in the GCC high or DoD tenants. That's something I would consider. And then I'm not going to say who might have commented that there would be some things that may or may not be announced that are relevant to the environments that we're talking about here today, but there might be more content than is typical.
Well, I would say, because I don't want any quote that Jay gave to be the reason why I'm not allowed to go to Ignite in the future. I would say that compliance and security stuff is usually always on par in all the environments. And so if you're in the records, NARA's got their user group, which I'll mention in a minute, but usually the sessions at Ignite and all of the national conferences are very relevant.
There we go. Jeremy, that was very politically correct of you.
And I want to be able to go to Ignite in the future, so stop.
This Jay guy with the big beard said that it's never relevant. You can't go. No, that's a good correction. Anyone want to say anything else about Ignite before we move on? No?
You should
It's free
definitely
to register.
go.
It's
Yeah,
free.
You should definitely
free.
go.
Yeah, I know that there's gonna be, there's a lot going on in general around the government space. So I don't think in general you want to miss it.
Yeah, I'll
Excellent.
say one last thing from an engineering perspective. So like a lot of times we hold out on releasing stuff or talking about stuff because we want to announce a lot of good things at Ignite. So if things have been a little bit silent, which they are on the roadmap update side, but you're going to hear a lot more things from Ignite. So definitely, don't miss out.
The keyword
awesome.
here is Ignite. That's what we're trying to say.
Fair enough. And I do love the conference. I have enjoyed every time I've attended. And I do think what I've been saying is more the general sentiment I hear from my customers. So if anyone's like, Jay doesn't think it's worth my time, that's not at all. I think it's a fantastic conference, and everyone who can should look at the schedule and try to go. And thank you all for beating my statements down and making sure people know that. All right. That's enough about Ignite, because this is not the Ignite show. Continuing through the community events, there is another conference at the exact same time that has in person, if you're in the Branson, Missouri area, or some hybrid capabilities, the North American Collaboration Summit, which has been happening for years and years. So highly recommended you check out NACS, which is at, I think, collabsummit.com or .org. We'll put the link in there somewhere. And then, that's happening at the same time. And my favorite part about it is they're actually going to have a track that is watching Ignite sessions in Branson, so you can watch it with other people. It's really cool.
That is a cool idea.
It's cool. That
It's
is
like
really
a
cool.
watch party.
It is a watch party, right? A live watch party.
You could even make a drinking game out of some of it. Maybe. I don't know. Just saying.
Interesting.
Speaking of drinking games, this has nothing to do with it whatsoever. October 13th, there is a SharePoint user group of DC on politics, economics, and corporate cybersecurity with Jeff Sylvia.
Excellent. On October 16th through 19th, the National Labs IT Conference, which I think I wrote it somewhere in here, but it's not showing up on this line item, is in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Sounds electrifying.
Ooh, well played.
Wow.
Similarly timed October 16th through 20, ARMA InfoCon. ARMA is one of the top information management organizations in the country, and they have a big conference going on. Generally, about 30% of attendees are government focused, so this is something that spreads both commercial and government. And what I'm really liking here, when I went to this about 3 or 4 years ago, they had 2 sessions on Microsoft 365. This time around, they have an entire 3-day track around Microsoft capabilities. So if you are in information management and you're looking for something to do that week, that is a very good conference to attend.
If you want to hear the word Viva over and over and over, go to that conference.
There's your drinking game.
There's your new drinking game. Wow. Hydration is important, my friends. October 22nd, very excited about this because it's in person. The DC Power Platform user group is going to have an in-person networking event. They don't have a particular topic in mind, but they're going to have board games, they're going to have lunch, and they're going to have a Stump the Experts, I like how they don't say Stump the Chump, Stump the Experts after lunch panel. So do check that out. That's October 22nd. Again, link with information about where to go.
On October 25th, it's another Microsoft 365 meetup for government, this time with, I hope I pronounced this right, Demetrius Rogers, former DCOO at Virginia VITA, and he'll be talking about taking government agencies to the cloud with confidence, strategy, migration, and modernization. I would hope with confidence, because if you take agencies to the cloud with like seasonal depression or like,
Oh,
that might be the more norm, but we try not to say that in advance.
Sarah,
No.
that's fantastic.
it wouldn't be good.
That I have the sudden urge to write that presentation. We're not done yet, though. October 28th, Collabcon, which is a new conference in the Kansas City area. That is a one-day community conference. They do have a hybrid component, so if you can't attend in person, but you like some of the sessions that are going to be there, it's a very inexpensive ticket to be able to attend, and that should be really good. Jeremy, your favorites?
My favorite, the NARA user group, Microsoft 365 user group. It's continuing to go strong. We just had our October meeting, and it was with our friend Erica. Oh, great, her last
Telly.
name just. That's it. Thank you, Telly. And she came and gave some more updates on compliance, Security Compliance Center and how that affects the records team. We don't have a topic yet for November, but it's always the a watched out for thing. And I'll put a link here so you can, for those of you who are on max.gov and are in the government space, you'll be able to access it, all the previous information plus the upcoming dates.
And do I understand correctly, you are always looking for speakers for that?
And we're always looking for speakers for that event who are, government focused. So reach out. I'll put my, I'll put my contact in the chat as well.
Awesome. Perfect.
All right. And November 8th through 10th, as well as 14th through 17th, there is, it's a newer program to Microsoft called Fedmake, and it's their federal program, and it delivers hackathon style events that are exclusively for federal, civilian, DoD, intel organizations, where conditions are created and facilitated by Microsoft experts for cross-organization teams to leverage Microsoft expertise and develop solutions that achieve their mission. It's very Mission Impossible stuff. Very awesome.
I like that. I like that. That's who's running. That's being run by the Microsoft Federal team. That's exciting.
Yes, it is. And we posted about it on our blog.
Ooh.
So you should check that out.
Hey, Sarah, do you know where it's going to be at? Like physically? Or is it?
Reston, Virginia. Why did I
That
say
would make
that?
sense.
I don't know. Yeah, Reston, Virginia. I'm guessing this is just the name of a place and not like, because it's called the Garage, but I'm guessing that's just the name of a place.
Yay!
That's the thing at Microsoft's office there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I'm just like, it's not just in some rando's garage, but yes, it's in. I mean, I guess that would be a hackathon style, but anyways, yes, it's in Reston, Virginia. So
that would be at our new location for
Yes.
folks in which is off of Freedom Drive in Western Virginia, and we have this brand new garage, and it's got you can fly drones and stuff in there, and there's all this maker stuff you can improve
Cool stuff
and stuff. Anyways, it's really cool. Yeah.
Well, I want to go just to see that, because Microsoft's been changing things around in here. So Reston used to have an MTC, right? And that's being moved to Arlington. And the K Street MTC was shut down, and they've reconfigured the K Street office. So the Arlington office for Microsoft, which is opening soon, is the big Microsoft Technology Center. And then now they've got the garage in Reston. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
All right. So if you haven't been to an in-person thing, the Fedmake stuff sounds really exciting.
It does, actually.
Last but not least, to wrap up the community events, and really this isn't government focused, but if you'll grant me some grace, since this is an event that I run, the M365 Chicago community event is coming up on November 11th. That is Veterans Day, and we are doing a salute to services. So that is our that's exactly. So a little bit of a play on words. We're actually working with the Chicago area charity that works with veterans for any fundraising that we're able to pull together. And we have, I think, 68 sessions, 75 speakers running 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Chicago time. So it should be a really fun conference. Yep.
And while you say it's not specific to government, I actually have done a government-focused session there before, because government is not just federal government. Like we focus a lot on federal government, but it's state, local government as well.
Absolutely. And I say it's not a government-focused event, but you're absolutely right. Check out the link, see if there's something of interest there. Not yet. Soon the sessions will be announced. But that's enough. That's like the longest community events section of our podcast we've ever had.
It is.
So let's expand upon that with a very short news from the community session or a roadmap update. I went out of order. Rima, what's new in the roadmap?
Well, so like I was alluding to before, there really isn't anything big that we can announce right now, but expect big announcements at Ignite. Again, October 12th through the 14th. You can attend virtually if you like. There's also some folks attending in person. It's free registration. This is part of our sequence of conferences. So in the beginning of the year, we start with Build, which is a developers conference. Then we go to our partners, which is Inspire. And then this latter half of the year, latter quarter of the year is Ignite. So we kind of try to take this journey through Build, Inspire, Ignite, and that's really kind of how we've designed our customer experience with conferences. And we hope that folks will join. It's a big one. It's our biggest conference of the year.
Yeah, it's starting tomorrow, but it's never too late to register.
Yep.
Ooh, look at you with the time traveling. And then Sarah, a robust news from the community, as we all got a little bit of a burn from that glare on how poorly we regularly write blogs for you. What's going on in the tech community?
So first off, we do have our standard monthly article from Jesse Tedoff on the public sector roadmap, any updates that are happening that month, followed by an article by Rima, who does write blogs for me on time. Thank you. And it's about starting with Teams apps in Gov Clouds. So you definitely want to check that out. There's always a lot of questions on like how you get started or, what obstacles you're hitting. And this touches on all of that. And then lastly, we have an article by Rocky Quake on Teams developer portal for GCC, which is now released. It's another new thing. Look at that. Look at
something did get announced in the month leading up to Ignite. Look at that.
Wow. Look at you. That's it, though. The rest you're just going to have to wait.
Oh, man. All right. Well, now you have to go to Ignite because we couldn't even do a roadmap session this week. But the other place you can, of course, keep an eye on things if you're not able to attend Ignite is I'm sure Sarah has a plethora of blog articles that will be written on any announcements that come at Ignite, because if she doesn't, she will chase people down. Ask me how I know. And with that said, to the regularly scheduled portion of our event, I'd like to bring our guest in, Stacy Deere. Stacy's an MVP and the owner of Focal Point Solutions. And we're going to talk about the Power Platform. Stacy, welcome to the cast, and thank you for tolerating our extremely long intro.
I enjoyed it. It's the most I've had fun all week. So,
Stacy, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and Focal Point Solutions?
Yeah. So, like I said, my name is Stacy Deere. I've been a Microsoft MVP now for 8 years, I think, something like that. And I started my company, Focal Point Solutions, be 11 years old in February. So getting up there. And we essentially, started on-prem, and then as Microsoft grew, the company grew into the cloud. We still have some clients on-prem, but majority is definitely all cloud-based. And essentially we do everything. So I've got different resources here and there, and we expand the whole gamut. And then, as you know, clearly I love to speak at events, such as this one. I'll do the Chicago one.
Yay!
But yeah, I live and breathe this stuff. I'm very excited. People tell me that governance is my middle name. So
yes. Yes, I've been watching some of your governance sessions for years. I remember being in some of the circuits with you there.
Yeah.
So one of the I was excited to have you come aboard to talk about this because a couple of years back, gosh, COVID time, probably like 4 years ago now, I think you and I talked. We had a federal customer who was starting to have that conversation about Power Platform and all their old SharePoint Designer workflows and how do they handle it. and your team stepped up and had a conversation with them about that. I know we still have tons in the federal space, tons and tons and tons of old 2013 workflows and 2010 workflows that are out of commission, right? And people just don't know how to move forward or what to do with that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits in using Power Automate for this and moving away from those old designer workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it is, some of it is a double-edged sword, but I love the fact that it's a lot more intuitive, right? So it's easier to use, easier to come up with naming schemes and putting things together and getting your users started. It's a much easier process to be able to do that. And it's just the fact that there's templates built in. So that's like the greatest thing when training someone or an organization. Like when we were talking, I started doing how can I get these people to not feel so freaked out that they're going to a new technology, but also feel like, oh my God, I got to be a developer to do this. And then just starting them with some of those simple templates and just showing them how to connect stuff. I've got, I always get emails here and there like, oh, I built this really cool thing. Can I schedule time to show you what I did? I love the fact that they can get excited, and they're not a developer. They're, one person was in accounting. But they're able to learn and grow with the tool because it's so intuitive, and just something easy to grasp for them, but improve their day-to-day work life too, which is nice.
Now, Jeremy, I'm going to spin it over to you a little bit here. You've spent a decent amount of time supporting. What are some of the negatives you've come across? And I don't mean to counter what Stacy's talking about, but what are some of the issues or roadblocks you've seen?
Yeah, it's something that you have to definitely take a look at and figure out, how do I want to get past this? So one great example is, Power Automate is extremely powerful, and I agree with Stacy. It's so much easier than Designer. You can empower your users with it, much easier than Designer. The graphical way you create flows is fantastic. What it doesn't have is built-in capability to say, hey, I also want to let this flow work when I leave the agency. So if I leave tomorrow, everything breaks. And so, at my last organization, we put policies and procedures in place for people to contact us and use a global account that they would share ownership with, so that if they were to leave, there would at least be an owner still there. But I think there's still challenges there, right? Let's say they created the flow and it sent email notifications, and they use their own account for that. All of that will break if they leave.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest challenge. Is it's a double-edged sword, as Stacy said. You can empower your users to create really cool stuff, and all that really cool stuff can break if they leave. And if nobody knows about it, right, then next thing you know, IT gets contacted, and IT's like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So
it's like the shadow IT of M365 is what you're telling me.
Somewhat like that.
Yeah, so I have, and I just thought about this the other day, because I actually have 2 clients right now that we are literally working on changing the flows and everything from someone's name who left the company over to a service account. And I was like, Power Automate and creating flows is almost like when a new version of SharePoint came out, and everybody just hit next, and set it up. And then a year later, they started from scratch because, they didn't plan for it.
Yep.
Power Automate seems to be essentially going that same path, because, it's just about a year some of these have been in, and now they're starting to realize all these issues because people left and changes. I would love at some point to, just like in the Power Apps world where you have the different environments that you can build, that it would be really nice to have that same type of streamlining that you can do with the flows as well, to help mitigate some of that stuff.
I like how you said a service account, because that's not true, right? There isn't a real service account.
Right.
You actually have to give a whole provision to license away to an account you create, and you call it a service account. Microsoft's created the whole concept of a service account for server processes. Why this one doesn't have that, I just is beyond me.
Yeah,
But it's not
always
this,
really
it doesn't
confusing.
stop you from being productive with it, but it does. These are things you just need to handle in advance.
Absolutely. The biggest things is just teaching the user some of the best practices too, but it's also very hard to govern, just because, at a higher level, you're setting those policies and procedures. Hey, we need to use these colors, these branding, and, this naming schema. But when you let your users start to do it, they don't know that. And then, if they're building it for themselves, not such a huge issue. But when they build something and then other people see it and it grows and more people and it becomes an organizational wide application, then that's when you start to have more issues. But
Especially
Yeah.
work names like send email when file is modified. You're like, wait, what?
What file are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's
Who's
the email
this
going
to? Yeah.
I would love it if when you select a template or you say new workflow, that it prompts you to name it. The default names, in my one demo tenant, I was looking at it, playing with some stuff, and I realized I had 30 things named the same exact thing.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So governance rule number 1, rename all your flows.
that
So I've actually come to that conclusion. It's like, okay, what am I messing around with to test? Okay, we'll just call it that thingamabob,
Oh no. All right, so in the list of what not to do from a governance perspective, we've got some great examples.
Well, so you mentioned best practices. Is there a way, and I know it's not a question we had here, but I'm gonna hit you off the cuff. Is there a way that you advise the government agencies on how to publish those best practices? So, because anybody can use Power Automate once the license is turned on. How do you get those best practices visible?
Well, it depends. Standard answer, right?
There's your hydration game.
Yeah, there you go. So I've had some that are like, we have to do this, right? They need to read it. They can't do anything until that's completed or whatever. So like they'll do a training session, take a quiz, they can get their access, whatever, but they're also audited, at times. But then there's some that they're like, oh, well, that seems a bit extreme. Can we just publish it out there like in a wiki or something to that nature? I've even had, which I can't remember, one of my devs ended up doing something, I can't remember what it was, but like have prompts, like something out there that they could easily see while they're actually in creating a flow that's kind of giving them a little bit of guidance that they can go through. I would love to see Microsoft expand on that a little bit more. Build it in and put some comments. Like I actually did the 5-day challenge with Collab 365 not long ago. And I did it just because I wanted to see how me, as someone who actually has some of the skills, right, would, do it from an end user perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned just with the way it's taught. And now someone could spend years teaching someone, and you would still have those little things that if you didn't do it, that could cause you a lot of issues, like naming your card, naming your field, and all that stuff, to where I quickly realized, even though because they didn't say it in the instructions, so I followed the instructions to the T, and I had more issues following the instructions than logically thinking about it and saying, hey, I want to deviate, so I did it twice, right? But so I wanted just to see it from a user point of view, and wow, unless you're very detailed and you're giving them some guidance on what to do and what not to do, it could cause a lot of issues within your organization, especially if you build something that everybody ends up loving and it becomes used, throughout your organization. So I learned a lot just by deciding to do it both ways. And so that was kind of cool. It gave me a different perspective on it.
That is interesting. I heard a ton there. One thing I did hear for sure, is make them do training before they get the license. And I actually, as a government person, I like that approach.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. You don't have to have Power Automate turned on. I like this about Power Automate. They don't have to have a license turned on for them to interact with something that has Power Automate running in the background against it, right? Different than Power Apps. And I don't even want to talk about Power Apps. Power Apps irritates me in that respect. But with Power Automate, you could say you're not getting the license to be able to create your own until you've done this training, signed those rules of behavior, standard stuff we do for a lot of systems in government.
Yep. What's really funny is we actually built a flow to do that. They went through the training, took it, and then the flow gave them the license.
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
I did that for forms. I did that to turn on access to forms because they had to do rules of behavior around what they are not allowed to collect in a survey. There's a lot of government rules about PII, and similarly, we use Flow to turn that on for them.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow, so this sounds already kind of like a common scenario up here. So
yeah,
dig into common scenarios. So what are some of the most popular or most, again, common scenarios that you see in workflows overall, but also specifically for government agencies? Like, what are they kind of asking you to do the most?
So approvals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Approvals tend to be the biggest thing because majority of them that say, hey, we need something that it's time and date stamped and it's something in the system, and then seeing their current process and realize they're handing documents here and there, or through email, and just because someone replies, that's like an approval, right? The other thing is just automation in general, but approvals tend to be the number one thing that they want.
Interesting. And do you use like the native approvals connector, or like is it just do you build it on your own? Like, what do you see most of from that point?
It depends. So that
so like
it depends on the scenario. A lot of times, I would say we probably use the native more than we do anything, but we do use both of them.
Awesome, good to know. Cool.
Yeah, I would say for you, Rima, in that respect, I've seen some extremely complicated. So it depends on what you mean by approval, right? It could be a document, which is the standard approval workflow,
right?
But it could be approval of something is allowed to occur. Like I did a cyber one where they were managing their waivers for whatever issues were there. They wanted to waive that issue for a period of time or whatever, so that allow that software to be installed. And the approval workflow I built for that, the tree diagram, if you were to zoom out, was so ridiculously large because of all the people who had to agree that waiver was allowed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Jeez, that's a lot.
That is a lot of approvals.
Yeah, one of the standard things about the default approval, I if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've used the default one. There were challenges if you reassigned, and there were challenges if somebody wanted to reject.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Still there.
Okay, so you have to build your own for that sort of thing.
So that really brings it down to like there's a level of complexity. If it's a simple, here's a document, you approve it, we're done. That sounds native. If it's here's a process or even a document, and if you don't approve it, what happens next? That's where we start to get into going beyond what's possible with the built-in approval and having to do your own flow.
Yeah.
That's
Well, biggest pitfall, I guess I would say, is there's not a lot you can do with the free. You're very limited, right, as for anything. To the point, man, I don't use it as often. I don't know. I don't know what my biggest pitfalls would be on that one. That's a hard one for me.
Oh, the number of flows that can execute could be a big one for a large organization.
Yeah, for a large organization, absolutely. Yeah, that would be big.
There was some, I'm trying to remember one, because my last agency, we had the free version, and I was outlining to them some of the pitfalls. I know that was a biggie. That was probably the largest, right? If you have if you have a form that everybody uses, like it's an integral the HR process and it's used constantly, you're gonna run into that pretty quick.
And the thing I also didn't like about it is the way it didn't notify you.
That's right. It just doesn't work afterwards.
Right. It just stops where it doesn't notify you that you're out.
It just stops pushing them. That's great. Yeah. We should do more of that.
It just stops. But then there's of course things you can't do because it's the free version, right? So you'd think that you're all good with the free version and you get so far and you're like, crap, now I can't finish it. So and with the fact that, I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing, again, double-edged sword, the fact that Microsoft's always making updates and changes, you just kind of never know sometimes. So.
Yeah, I was at conferences back to back the last 2 weeks, and it was one of them was the Power Platform conference, and we had people up there doing their demos, and they're like, literally worked this morning. Please hold while I try and figure out the new process for this.
I think back on that. I'm sorry. I've been running my brain trying to remember all the pitfalls I came up with. The other one is premium connectors.
Yes.
And,
you're limited to what you can connect to, right?
And the main one being one that you can use to hit APIs, right? There's there's a premium connector you can use to where you can leverage APIs against any API you build to extend that capability, and that is not available to you, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, that goes back to the complexity, right? Like if you're looking to, I find this with whether it's a Power App or a Flow or whatever. I see citizen development, this idea that anyone can create a workflow, anyone can create an app, anyone can build something for teams. It's fantastic to solve problems. It follows a very iterative approach to things. But just because you have built something successful doesn't mean 6 months from now you need to look at it again later and ensure that it was built for the enterprise. In this space, especially in the federal government or the large DIBs or even the large state agencies, you have hundreds of thousands of people in your organization. And, if you build a flow for you, that's great. But when you start to share that off, was the data source you're using built to support that many users? And if you're using the free version and you're using a SharePoint list, for example, is that list going to handle the load that's being thrown at it for your now enterprise item? So let's build. I mean, if you guys don't mind building off of that, like, how do you, once you've built something that's working for you or for your problem, do you have any recommendations for how within a government agency to bubble that up and to start sharing that with other people? Because start of this conversation, you both commented, Jeremy, Stacy, you both commented on, like, if I leave, that thing no longer works.
Right.
So if I create something and I start sharing it with other people, what recommendations do you have to make sure that this can be more enterprise ready and enterprise capable?
Well, I actually have a couple of things that I've done. So I love to build training sites, especially like if I'm, launching new things and they're moving to the cloud or whatever. I'll create them a little training site and I do the little how-to videos, the little snippet videos. And so that was a question, exactly what you just asked was a question for the manager of the development team said, hey, whether we're building it or someone else is building it, maybe we want to showcase it to show others so we're not reinventing the wheel, we can share, that type of thing. So essentially we did snippet videos around things that they built and displayed them on the site.
Oh, nice.
And then in another scenario, we kind of did like the brown bag lunch type of thing. You come in and then they had like an app day or whatever, and they would do it that way.
I have an idea. It wasn't successful in my last organization because there weren't enough people using Power Automate, I think, to make it truly successful yet. But if you have a good quantity of people who are using it, Power Automate will let you export it into a zip file. I believe it's a zip file, and then you can post that into, say, a SharePoint document library, where you're sharing your templates. And we went one step further, and we had the policies in place, we just didn't have the user group there, where our plan was tracking in a SharePoint list, what did it do, what was its focus, and links to the flow, the zip file for the flow, and a link to a document that kind of gave a better explanation of what it was doing. So, us government people, we love our documentation, make you go the extra mile, but it would make it easier to share that. The goal was, as we got them over time, we could then go through that curated list and say, okay, which ones do we think are going to be best practices? We just that program just hadn't got far enough down the path before I moved on to the next agency.
Yeah. So we took it, I took it a little bit step further. So like if they saw the video and they wanted it on their site, they could actually submit a form.
Okay.
Right. Fill in the information. And so they could get it on the site, but it did two things. So we introduced them to something new that they could use, so it was reusable. They got it on their site, but we're also tracking where it's being used within the organization and identifying it to the point if it becomes something X size to ensure that it meets the compliance and security regulations, it's being tracked and follows the proper process.
That's a great idea. And the type of data, right? Because if they're doing anything with PII, then it immediately needs to be, security is an issue at that point.
Absolutely.
Stacy, I like where you're going with that, because the idea that you want people to share, you want people to solve problems and say, I solved a problem, this might be repeatable for you. But you also want to know where that is happening, inventory, so to speak, because then if there was a problem, where it's going to snowball. You can get ahead of modifying and expanding. So that's a really great idea, being able to track where you're doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so like a great example of that is, I know some of you have seen the corporate directory I built years ago, right? So there was actually probably about 6 months ago, Microsoft changed one of the field names and broke that corporate directory. But because in our system, anybody that, any of my clients that had it, we had it tracked. So as soon as it became an issue, we were able to reach out and get it taken care of, and so they weren't down. The staff directory wasn't down. And then, of course, we were able to send out blogs because, I gave it away at workshops and stuff. But tracking that stuff is huge because it's you being proactive instead of reactive, which we always want to try to get ahead of things. So.
Yeah, Power Platform, Power Automate, these are not things to remove IT. They are things to make sure that everyone is enabled, but there still has to be some engagement.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay. Jeremy, I think you have the next one.
So, it really goes to, I'm sure Microsoft thought of this, right? This is certainly not an afterthought. And I know a bit of the answer, I'm tongue in cheek saying that. But when people leave, right, we talked about how their Power Automate flows stop working, but they still exist.
Right.
And people create test 1, test 2, test 6, right, flows. Is there a way administratively, how do we manage that, right? They all exist out there. Is there a way to see them all? Is there a way to know that there are flows that aren't being used?
So it depends on how they're created and how their permissions, if they're done with the service account or, the account, of course, you can go out there and see them. Also, if you're an owner or not, right? Could there be flows out there that you're not aware of? Absolutely. So it just really depends on how they're built and how they've set up the ownership. But right now there's not and honestly, actually, I believe you can run some PowerShell to actually see all of them in the organization, but not in a nice visual representation, so you can do something about it.
Yeah, that's. I'll be surprised if we don't. Every time this is not to be really rude. I love Microsoft products, but they have a tendency not to build a UI component for everything anymore. It seems to be we all have to become PowerShell experts.
Yeah, I always was a little hesitant with a PowerShell, but now I'm like, man, I just got to get over it.
Yeah.
So.
I have both positive and negative things to say that as a partner in the Microsoft ecosystem, so I will just smile and nod. Stacy, first of all, thank you. This has been a really great conversation.
Yeah.
You know, for our government listeners, whether they're state and local or federal or Department of Defense, do you have any parting words on, you know, what type of caution they should take or what type of approach they should take as they consider their path in the Power Platform and Power Automate specifically?
Yeah, and I'm going to say I don't think my answers ever change from regardless of what, if it's government or what application. It's just planning it. You know, start first by realizing what you're getting ready to do and what your pitfalls might be within your organization. Understand your organization's policies and procedures, compliance regulations, and your users, your culture of your company.
Yep.
How are they going to take this in? Are they going to use it? How would they use it? And plan accordingly before you start a large implementation.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And in government, you think of us as planners, but not always. Not always. So I think that's a great reminder that we should always know what it is we're trying to accomplish before we start it.
Yeah, and really quick, Stacy, are there any like good resources that you found that maybe we can point to? We can include the links, you know, to our listeners and watchers. But
yeah, I probably have a couple links I can send over to you.
Awesome.
Typically when I read something and I'm like, hey, that's some good advice, I'll kind of tag it. So I can send you a couple of those. Absolutely. Awesome. But one thing I have learned, especially around this, there's not like one blog or one thing that I've read that really encompasses it. It's like I read 10 blogs, a weekend or whatever, and out of those 10 blogs, I got like 4 really great things that really stuck with me, right? So there's just not one, but hey, maybe that's something you guys can do, like, bring it all together. But yeah, I've not seen anything that's really concrete all together, but there's things out there here and there, and I can definitely share some of those.
Awesome. Thank you. And for people who want to hear more from you, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best method?
So you're more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
You're welcome to email me as well at sdeere@focalpointsolutions.co. I respond to everybody. My running joke when I speak is I'm not a lawyer. I don't charge you for a question.
For the per character.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Twitter. I'm out there on Twitter as well. SL Deere. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Stacy, thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime.
And to the rest of my crew, Sarah, Rima, Jeremy, great to see you all this month. I need to confirm that we have actually finalized our topic for next month because I forgot to finish that today. But as usual, the second Tuesday of each month, we will have another M365 government community call. And we have a couple of really interesting topics that we're trying to nail down. We're talking about women in technology. We're talking about adoption and information governance. And there's a number of things that will be in the coming months. So make sure you subscribe to get notification of our next episode. And thank you for joining us.